Hello, Colorado Realtors. I'm Scott Peterson. Thank you for joining me for another international edition of Legal Bites. We've been all over the place. You know where we've been. But now we are in Bangkok, Thailand. Bangkok, Thailand, a beautiful place. It's a very hectic city with lots of beautiful statues, but much noise and very, very hectic. So I'm going to give you my Legal Bites from a nice, quiet, meditative place that I'm about to go find in the distance. Okay. So we had to get out of Bangkok. We're still in beautiful Thailand, and it's such a lovely place here. I'm gonna have this a little bit toned down version of Scott, not so intense and at you like I normally am, because this is a zen and peaceful place. And on this edition of Legal Bites, I want to talk to you about, don't be afraid, we're going back to the commission position statements, but it's my all-time favorite commission position statement. It's Commission Position Statement 27 related to adverse material facts. This is something that I talk about all the time on the hotline and in education sessions and every place else, because it's a critical thing to understand. The written disclosure of any adverse material facts is a requirement that's placed not just on sellers to buyers, but also listing brokers to buyers, as well as buyers to sellers, and potentially buyer brokers to sellers or listing brokers as well. This requirement that we disclose any adverse material facts that are actually known in writing to the other party. Commission Position Statement 27 speaks to what is an adverse material fact. It was actually written by the Colorado Attorney General's office some years ago, and it essentially establishes what's a three-part test. The first part of the test is, the ultimate question is it a fact? First thing you're going to ask yourself when you're talking about adverse material fact, is something a fact? A fact would be it's an actual fact versus rumor, conjecture, speculation, hearsay, something that's not a fact. And so if something isn't a fact, if it's a fact, then you go on to the next part of the test. And the second part of the test is going to be, is it a material fact? Is there materiality to it? And the test for materiality is you put your buyer hat on, or the other party's hat, maybe the seller's hat on. You say, would a reasonable buyer want to know this fact? And if the answer is yes, then it's material. Would a reasonable buyer or a reasonable seller want to know this fact? It's material if the answer is yes. And so now we have a material fact if we're answering that question yes. And if we've answered those two parts of the test with yes, material and fact, then we move on to the third part of the test, and that is adversity. Is there some adverse implication to it, some negative implication, consequence, cost, as opposed to being a positive material fact? Well, you might want to disclose a positive material fact because it's a marketing element to your property, but an adverse material fact would be something that has a negative implication to it, some adversity to it. And if your answer is yes, it's an adverse material fact, then we know that it's a written required disclosure. Under paragraph 10 of the contract to buy and sell, the seller would be obligated to provide that information in writing if they have that actual knowledge to the buyer. That's a requirement of paragraph 10. We know under license law that it's a requirement of the listing broker. If the seller doesn't disclose it, it's a requirement of the listing broker to disclose that in writing to a buyer if they have that buyer if they have that information. And similarly, I would say that a buyer in connection with the contract to buy and sell has an obligation to disclose any adverse material facts that they're aware of for themselves. Now that may be something related to the financing conditions as an example, or their ability to qualify for a loan, or some other interest that they might have that they're not disclosing to the seller in writing. If that is an adverse material fact, then the buyer has an obligation to disclose it. And similarly, under license law, the buyer's broker, if the buyer doesn't disclose this adverse material fact, would have an obligation to disclose that to the seller. It's intended to keep the parties on a equal playing field as it relates to their ability to negotiate with each other and to object to the other party's actions in relationship to the contract. So I believe that the very best thing you can do, if you're particularly a listing broker working with sellers, is to download on the Commission's website, and I'll put a link to that Commission Position Statement 27 right here. and save that on your desktop. And every time you send your seller, like as an example, a seller's property disclosure for them to complete to the best of their information, you should also send them a copy of CP27 and inform that seller to say, listen, before seller you go and complete this seller's property disclosure, it would be really helpful and important for you to review Commission Position Statement 27 as it relates to what is an adverse material fact in Colorado and therefore what is their disclosure obligation. Super helpful piece of free tool for you to utilize in connection with your brokerage services. So remember that, Commission Position Statement 27, Adverse Material Fact Test. Hopefully that's helpful because this comes up all the time in the course of a real estate transaction going either direction. All right, friends, with that, we will see you on another edition of Legal Bites, and I can break the news here. I can break it for you now. We're getting out of Thailand. It's been beautiful, but again, budget constraints and the whole 9 yards. We're headed back to Colorado, and we're gonna get into the corners of Colorado. One of my favorite places, the beautiful town of La Junta, Colorado. We'll see you there on the next edition of Legal Bites. Hey, look, an elephant. You know, realtor friends, the elephant is actually the national symbol of Thailand, although sadly, the elephant population has declined dramatically. It's gone from over 100,000 elephants in 1850 down to only about 2,000 elephants now due to poaching. Really a kind of a sad situation there. The top foods in Thailand are pad thai noodles, tom yum goong, green curry, and mango sticky rice for dessert. Yum. I know where I'm headed next, some mango sticky rice. Is that real gold? Real gold? Beautiful.